Good morning. Normally, our Easter celebrations can get a little fuzzy. Rabbits, chicks, baby ducks, and jelly beans, chocolate eggs, and all of that. Not that there's anything wrong with them. They are part of the fun of Easter, along with lilies and banners, special music, and new clothing. Everything is new, and yet we do it every year. It's become our routine. But not this year. This year is very different. We're together and yet alone. We can't do things the way we have always done them, and yet we are still here at worship on Easter morning because we know that even though things are different, this is still the place to be. The bunnies and jelly beans are nice, but we've always needed more. We're here again to hear again what Easter is all about, even though it is different this year. Maybe that's more like how Mary Magdalene and the other Mary felt that first Easter morning. As they walked in the early morning darkness, everything was so different. Mary Magdalene had finally gotten her life on track, had a new life of following and learning from Jesus. And that had become the focus of her days. She had grown to love him. Now he was gone. Not only was it dark in the world that morning, but it was dark in her soul. Where there had once been a glimmer of hope, there was only despair. And in that darkness, the two women come to the tomb. There is an earthquake. A bright and shiny angel appears. The guards aren't any help. They are shaking and stand there like dead men. But the angel invites the women to look inside the tomb. It is empty. And then they are given a message to take back to the disciples. Life isn't over. Jesus is still at work in the world. In fact, Jesus is going ahead of them. There, in the darkness of life, they are surprised by the light of Easter, and their story has become ours, the story we remember and celebrate together this morning. It is the very essence of our faith, that no matter what happens, God's plan is for life. It is the power of God that brought us to life in the first place, and that keeps calling to us and promising us that even after our hearts stop beating, life will go on. That life is what we call eternal or everlasting. And it doesn't wait until we die. It starts right now, today. Easter has always been more than what we have ever experienced it to be. It is knowing that when everything is upside down, topsy-turvy, chaotic, and more than we can bear, God is at work. And like the Marys who are hurrying in the dark to the tomb, we might not recognize new life when it is right in front of us. But when the risen Christ speaks our name, we know. Perhaps on this Easter 2020, you are resigned to the pain of life being so different from what it was, and trying to cope with the new reality. Even before we had to be isolated at home, perhaps some other life event had convinced you that not much makes sense in this life, and although your heart is still beating, it is also breaking. Perhaps there's been so much loss and sorrow in your life that you showed up here today not looking for life, but expecting to find more of the same. Easter bunnies, jelly beans, sugar-coated words that feed your soul about as much as candy nourishes your body. Perhaps on this Easter 2020, you can relate to the men who came to the tomb after the women tell them that the tomb is empty. You have followed others to church and looked into this whole Christian thing, and you just don't understand. You just don't see the proof for any such claims. Here's the great thing about the gospel story. The ones who come to the tomb don't see Jesus. They don't get any proof. They just go back home and continue to hang out together until one day Jesus appears in the midst of their dark night. When Jesus appears to the disciples, what he does first is show his scars. "Touch my wounds," he says. "See here the evidence of the lowest point in my life, the time when I was defeated and overcome, beaten down and asking why God would forsake me." Even in his new life, he wears the scars that point to tragedy, not his triumph, pain and struggle instead of victory. His scars and wounds do not keep the power of God from flowing through him. And as God has sent him into the world, so he sends us, not to cover up our scars, not to deny our wounds, but to show people that the same power that raised him from the dead is alive in us. Easter is not a promise that your business or your family or the church or the world will always be like it used to be. It is a promise that the God who gave you your heartbeat will never, ever abandon you. The power that raised Jesus from the dead can raise you from despair. And it is calling you by name. And it is still at work doing a new thing in you and in the church and in the world. Easter is the promise that nothing in our past, present, or future has the ultimate power. We are defined by the life, the energy, the light of God that flows through us and through all of creation, making all things new. Easter is a story we can't prove, except that it happens over and over in our life. So don't try to prove it. Experience it. Embrace it. Live it. That is the good news we find at the empty tomb every year. That has not changed at all, and it is the reason for our alleluias. It is good news, good enough to share. And as we do, we find Jesus, the risen Jesus, Jesus alive. And he is out there ahead of us, giving us power for abundant life, helping us tell the story. To God be the glory forever. Amen.